Hey groupers, Pastor Marshall here. Well, we're getting to that part in the gospel where it gets dark and difficult, so I got my buddy Max here to get me through. I hope that you're ready to dig in. To begin with, I asked this question on Sunday, and I wonder if you could help populate the answer, just as a group discussion to get the ball rolling, to break the ice, to warm up everyone's vocal cords. Why do you think people do things they know are wrong, that they know are wrong? What has been your personal experience in this department? Why do people do things knowing that they're wrong and they do them anyways? And then I wonder, after you make a list of reasons that people give for doing things that they know are wrong and why they do it, I wonder then if you could go back through that list and talk about which of these reasons for doing bad things, which of these reasons change if you are a Christian? And what has your experience been in that department? How has your motivation changed? How has your sin nature been redeemed some after becoming a Christ follower? Well, the first thing that happens in this story is that Pilate flogs Jesus. Why did he do that? Why did Pilate flog Jesus? And did it work? Did he accomplish his goals in having Jesus flogged? And then why did Pilate bring Jesus out before the Jewish leaders in verse 5 after all of this abuse? What was his purpose in bringing him out after all this abuse and standing him before, and here's this line, here is the man, standing him before the Jewish leaders? What was he trying to accomplish in this second act in his role in this play? How many times, you'll have to go back to a little bit in the previous chapter, but how many times did Pilate declare that Jesus was not guilty of deserving death? I'm not suggesting that he said that Pilate was innocent, or that Pilate said that Jesus was innocent, but that he did not deserve death. How many times did Pilate say that Jesus did not deserve death? And what does this tell you about Pilate's character when we get to the end of this story? Because he's going to order Jesus to be crucified. What does it tell us about his character at the end of this story? Look at the Jewish leaders now. And what arguments did the Jewish leaders use to convince Pilate, to get him to go the direction that he went? What arguments did they use to get Pilate to turn his back on Jesus and declare that Jesus should die? Look at verse 7. What is significant about the Jewish leaders' statement in verse 7? And what does it tell us about the dynamics involved? What does it tell us about what's going on in this story? And then look at verse 8. Why do you think that Pilate was initially afraid? Because it said that he became more afraid in verse 8. So when we get to verse 8, go backwards. Why is Pilate afraid before verse 8? And then go forward. Why did he become more afraid? What happened that made Pilate more afraid? And why do you think that Jesus refused to answer Pilate in verse 9? He's getting a habit of not defending himself. Why do you think that Jesus did not answer Pilate in verse 9? Now, verse 11, these are our only red letters in this passage, and so we'll focus on them a little bit. In verse 11, where did Jesus say that Pilate's power comes from? Where did he say his power comes from? And what would be the two parts that this could mean? What would be the two answers that this could mean? And then, what did Paul say about this in Romans chapter 13, verse 1? Turn in your Bibles, look at Romans chapter 13, verse 1. What does Paul say? And then, based on what Paul says and based on what Jesus says, who is ultimately bringing about Jesus' crucifixion? Who is ultimately in charge of this story? Now look again at verse 11, again at your red letters. This time look at the second half. Sometimes we would call this 11a and 11b if you get higher up in church Bible study. Who is guilty of the greater sin? Jesus says someone is guilty of the greater sin. Who is he talking about? Why are they guilty of the greater sin? And then who, why, and then what? What does this have to say about us as Christ followers? Go back to our opening discussion. What does this have to say about us as Christ followers when we willingly rebel? What does it say about that? Well, those are the things that I think that you'll enjoy discussing. I'm sure that there will be some other things that you'll discuss, as you always do. I just want to always remind you of the applications that were made on Sunday. We talked about the reasons that people were rebelling in this passage, that they were doing the wrong thing even though they knew it was the wrong thing to do. And one reason is because of a grudge. And so sometimes because of a grudge, we'll do the wrong thing. Sometimes it's because of position and pleasure. The grudge, of course, that was the Jewish people. The Pilate here is this position that comes with all kinds of pleasures. And then we look at these Roman guards, the other character in this story. And it's just they become desensitized. And so sometimes that causes us to do things. And then it was just asking about where in your life are these three things maybe at play, and you need to do some correction. Well, I hope that you have a great group. Me and my buddy Max are going to just work our way through these chapters together because they're difficult. And I hope that you'll continue to join us for this process. God bless.